She begged for leftover food. Her rich boss secretly followed her. What he discovered made him cry. Maria was a cleaner in a big corporate office, quietly moving through her shifts, blending into the background. Her life was simple, almost invisible. Mr. Thompson, her boss, on the other hand, was a wealthy executive who dined in the most expensive restaurants, drove a luxury car, and wore suits that cost more than Maria's monthly salary. Their worlds were poles apart, but fate had a way of bringing them face to face in the most unexpected way. One afternoon, Maria did something unthinkable in the eyes of her colleagues. She begged for leftover food at a restaurant where her boss and coworkers were eating. Some laughed, some whispered, and others just stared in disbelief. But what no one realized was that behind her quiet voice and humble request lay a story much deeper than hunger. Her boss noticed. He said nothing at the time, but later, he secretly followed her. What he discovered that day was so raw, so human, that it shook him to his core, and it made him cry. But why would a working woman beg for leftovers when she had a job? Why did her boss feel compelled to trail behind her in secret? And what could he possibly discover that would break down the walls of his wealthy, comfortable world? Sit back, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into this interesting story. The lunchtime rush filled the company's favorite restaurant. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the rich aroma of freshly cooked meals filled the air. Employees sat at polished tables, scrolling through their phones while waiting for waiters to deliver their orders. The place sparkled with wealth, the kind of establishment where a single dish cost more than a day's wages for some. At the far corner of the restaurant sat Maria, the office cleaner. Her uniform, plain and slightly faded, contrasted sharply with the bright suits and elegant dresses around her. She sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes darting between the menus others held and the untouched breadbasket placed at the edge of her table. She wasn't here to eat like the others, her stomach was already rumbling, but her wallet was empty. Across the room, Mr. Thompson, the company's wealthy executive, cut into a perfectly cooked steak. His watch glistened under the soft light, his presence commanding. Colleagues laughed at his jokes, eager to impress. Thompson looked every bit the man in charge, powerful, confident, untouchable. Yet, unknown to him, one of his own staff sat silently in the same room, living a reality worlds apart. Maria watched as plates piled high with half-eaten meals returned to the kitchen. Perfectly good food, wasted. Her heart ached, not for herself, but for the little ones waiting at home. They hadn't eaten since the day before, and she knew tonight would be no different if she returned empty-handed. Summoning courage, she approached a waiter, her voice trembling. "Excuse me, would it be all right if I could take what's left from the plates?" she asked, almost whispering, her eyes lowered. A hush fell over the immediate tables. Conversations paused, forks froze mid-air. Some co-workers whispered under their breath. A young intern giggled, nudging his friend. "Did she just beg for leftovers?" he muttered. Another rolled her eyes, pretending not to watch. Maria ignored the stares. Hunger and desperation left no room for pride. The waiter hesitated but then nodded, slipping her a small bag filled with bread and scraps untouched by diners. Maria's hands trembled as she clutched the bag like treasure. From his table, Mr. Thompson noticed. He didn't say a word, didn't raise an eyebrow, but something stirred within him. He sipped his wine slowly, his gaze lingering on Maria longer than he intended. In his world, poverty was a distant concept, spoken of in charity events or seen fleetingly on television. But now, it was here, sitting in his restaurant, wearing his company's uniform, begging for scraps. Maria returned to her seat briefly, eyes glistening but lips curved into the faintest smile. She had food for her children tonight. The whispers around her grew faint compared to the thought of their faces lighting up at the sight of bread. For Mr. Thompson, however, the moment planted a seed. Questions swirled in his mind, though he remained silent. Something about her quiet dignity amidst humiliation unsettled him. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a journey that would shatter his understanding of life, and change him forever. The hum of conversation in the restaurant lingered in Mr. Thompson's mind long after the plates were cleared. He returned to the office surrounded by chatter from his colleagues, but he heard none of it. All he could see in his thoughts was Maria, her timid request for leftovers, her trembling hands clutching that small bag of food as if it were gold. In the office hallway later that afternoon, the fluorescent lights flickered slightly. Employees bustled around, exchanging greetings, typing furiously at keyboards, or gossiping in hushed tones. Yet, Mr. Thompson remained unusually still, standing at the far end near his glass-walled office. His eyes tracked Maria as she walked past with her mop and cleaning supplies. She moved quietly, avoiding eye contact, almost invisible. The same way she had been since she started working there. She was efficient, polite, and never caused trouble. To most, she was simply the cleaner. To Thompson now, she was a puzzle. Why would someone with a job beg for food? He thought. Doesn't she get paid every month? Or is something else going on? Maria didn't notice his gaze. She carried on, her bag tucked tightly under her arm, as if it contained something precious. Thompson noticed the subtle way she glanced around, checking the hallway, almost as if to ensure no one was following. Curiosity tugged at him. He wasn't a man easily distracted. Deals worth millions passed through his hands weekly. Yet, something about her troubled dignity, the desperation hidden behind her calm, shook him. Pretending to check his phone, he leaned casually against the wall as Maria headed toward the elevator. The soft ding echoed, and she stepped inside. He hesitated for a moment, debating. Following her was irrational. It wasn't his business. She was just an employee. But deep inside, he couldn't silence the voice urging him to understand. He stepped into the stairwell instead, moving quickly downward, taking each step deliberately, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete. By the time he reached the lobby, Maria was already exiting through the side door, carrying her worn-out handbag and the little bag of food. The contrast struck him. Outside, his sleek black sedan waited, polished to perfection. Maria, meanwhile, walked briskly down the street, shoulders hunched, shoes worn thin. She clutched the food close to her chest as though afraid someone might take it from her. Thompson paused at the entrance, adjusting his tie, his mind whirling. He had never stepped beyond his role as the boss. But now, he was about to cross an invisible line, driven not by arrogance but by a need to know. Why would she risk humiliation for leftovers? What is she hiding? What am I missing? He muttered under his breath. Determination replaced hesitation. Thompson slipped into the street, keeping a safe distance. His expensive suit made him stick out in the modest neighborhood streets, but he didn't care. His curiosity had transformed into something deeper. An uneasy empathy he couldn't ignore. That day, without planning it, the rich man began to follow the quiet woman. And though neither of them knew it yet, what he would soon discover would bring tears to his eyes and forever change how he viewed the world. The city afternoon sun had begun to dip, casting long shadows across the pavement as Maria hurried along the sidewalk. She held her bag close, walking with purpose, head lowered, weaving between crowds of people heading home from work. To anyone else, she looked like a woman simply trying to get home quickly. But to Mr. Thompson, following from a safe distance, every step she took deepened his curiosity. He trailed her cautiously, careful not to be noticed. He stayed far enough behind to avoid suspicion, occasionally ducking into storefronts or pretending to glance at his phone when she slowed down. His polished leather shoes and tailored suit felt oddly out of place in the neighborhood she led him through. The towering glass offices and cafes of the business district gave way to cracked sidewalks, graffiti-painted walls, and rows of small, worn-out apartment buildings. The air smelled faintly of fried food mixed with the dust of the streets. Maria's pace quickened as she neared the poorer side of the city. Thompson found himself slowing, almost stunned. He had never been here before. In his world, he was chauffeured through clean streets, past places designed to impress. But here, the buildings leaned against one another, tired and weary, much like the people walking past. He noticed how Maria glanced over her shoulder more than once, her eyes scanning as if to check she wasn't being followed. Thompson froze each time, pretending to study a street sign or pull out his phone. She seemed nervous, protective of the bag she held. What could possibly be so important in that small package of leftover food? Thompson thought, shaking his head. She acts as though it were a treasure. At one corner, a group of children played with a deflated ball, their laughter echoing off the walls. Thompson saw Maria smile faintly as she passed them, though her smile faded just as quickly. He could see her exhaustion now, the heaviness in her steps, the quiet determination in her eyes. This wasn't simply a walk home, this was a mission. Finally, Maria turned into a crumbling apartment block. The paint was chipped, the stair rails rusted, and the faint smell of dampness drifted out. Thompson hesitated, standing across the street, unsure if he should follow further. His world had always kept him insulated from places like this. But curiosity, stronger than his discomfort, rooted him to the spot. Through a window on the first floor, faint laughter rang out. A child's voice. Then another. Thompson's breath caught in his throat. He realized suddenly what might be waiting for her inside. He stepped closer, his chest tightening, heart beating faster. He was beginning to understand, though he didn't want to believe it. The truth wasn't just about hunger, it was about responsibility, sacrifice, and love. Standing in the fading light, watching Maria disappear into the building, Thompson knew this was no ordinary employee's story. It was something far deeper, something that would soon break his heart wide open. The hallway of the apartment block smelled faintly of damp concrete and fried onions. The light bulbs overhead flickered as though they were tired of holding on. Mr. Thompson hesitated at the doorway, half hidden in the shadows, his hand resting on the cold banister. He shouldn't have followed this far, but something about Maria's quiet desperation compelled him forward. He leaned slightly, peering through the thin gap in the ajar door Maria had slipped into. Inside, the room was small, almost suffocating. The wallpaper peeled in corners, and the furniture was mismatched, worn by years of use. But what caught his attention wasn't the poverty, it was the warmth. 3 children rushed to greet Maria, their faces bright with anticipation. "Mama, did you bring us something?" the youngest cried, bouncing on her toes. Maria's tired expression melted into a smile. She crouched down, pulling the little bag of leftovers close to her chest before opening it. With a gentleness that seemed rehearsed, she began dividing the food carefully, tearing bread into equal portions, making sure each child received the same share. The children's laughter filled the room as they devoured the scraps with pure joy. Thompson's throat tightened. He noticed how Maria herself didn't take a bite. She simply sat back, watching them eat, her eyes glistening with both love and pain. Her stomach growled audibly in the quiet moments between their chatter, but she ignored it, stroking her daughter's hair instead. From his place at the doorway, Thompson felt something unfamiliar stir in him, guilt. His life had been one of abundance, excess even. Plates of untouched food had been cleared away at his own table while this woman, his employee, depended on scraps just to keep her children fed. As he watched, Maria's gaze drifted toward a faded photograph on the shelf. It was of her and a man, her late husband. The lines of her face softened, and she whispered almost inaudibly, "I'm trying, Daniel. I'm trying my best." The weight of her words sank deep into Thompson's chest. He realized this wasn't just about poverty. It was about survival. About a mother sacrificing everything, even her own hunger, to keep her children smiling. A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. He had built his empire believing he understood people, employees, clients, competitors. But here was Maria, working tirelessly in his building every day, carrying a world of struggle he had been blind to. "Why didn't I see this?" he muttered under his breath, his voice breaking. Inside, Maria pulled the blanket tighter around her youngest child, humming softly to lull her to sleep. The other two leaned against her, full but drowsy, their little hands clutching her arms. She held them close, her face calm but her eyes reflecting exhaustion beyond words. For Thompson, the scene was unbearable yet transformative. He had followed her out of curiosity, but what he discovered struck him deeper than any boardroom defeat or financial loss ever could. It wasn't pity he felt, it was a shattering realization of humanity, responsibility, and love. And it made him cry. The next morning, the office carried its usual rhythm, the buzz of ringing phones, the clatter of keyboards, and the aroma of coffee drifting through the air. Employees hurried past one another, each lost in their routines. But for Mr. Thompson, nothing about this day felt ordinary. The images from the night before refused to leave him. Maria's tired smile, her children's eager hands, the silence of her own hunger. He sat in his corner office, staring out at the skyline, his thoughts heavy. Papers were stacked neatly on his desk, contracts waiting for signatures, but for once, they meant nothing. All my success, all my wealth, and right under my roof, someone can't even afford dinner for her kids, he thought, shaking his head. He rubbed his eyes, his heart aching with an unfamiliar weight. Finally, he called through the intercom. "Send Maria in." Minutes later, Maria entered, her posture cautious. She clutched her cleaning cloth nervously, unsure why she had been summoned. Her eyes flickered with worry. Did someone complain about me? Am I in trouble? She wondered, her palms sweating. Thompson rose from his chair slowly, uncharacteristically unsure of how to begin. For the first time, he didn't see the cleaner. He saw a mother, a provider, a fighter. He cleared his throat, his voice softer than usual. "Maria," he began, "saw something yesterday that I was never meant to see. And it opened my eyes." Her face stiffened, panic flashing in her eyes. Had he followed her? Did he know? He stepped closer, his tone filled with sincerity. "You've worked here for years, quietly, diligently. And yet, I never noticed, never asked, how you were managing. That was my mistake." Maria blinked back tears, her lips parting, but no words came out. He continued, his voice trembling. "You should never have to beg for leftovers to feed your family. No one under my roof should live like that. Not while I sit here with more than I'll ever need." Her head lowered, shame mixing with disbelief. But then he added firmly, "From today, your salary is doubled. A food allowance will be arranged. And I will personally ensure your children receive support for their schooling." Maria gasped, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "Sir. I don't know what to say." "Don't thank me," he interrupted gently. "Thank yourself. The love I saw in your home, the way you gave everything to those children without keeping a bite for yourself, it changed me, Maria. You taught me more about strength and sacrifice in one night than I've learned in a lifetime of success." Her hands trembled as she covered her face, sobbing quietly. For the first time in years, she felt the crushing weight of survival lift, if only slightly. Thompson reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You deserve more than scraps. And from today, you'll never beg for food again." The office, the skyline, the world itself seemed different in that moment. For Maria, it was hope reborn. For Thompson, it was transformation, an awakening of conscience. And both of them would never be the same.